Welcome everyone to Legion Gaming. I'm your host Donnie, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Deucy.
Hello everyone.
Deucy, how are you this fanciful Saturday afternoon here?
Well, I am doing better than I was the last time we recorded.
Yeah, that was a couple weeks back for our Game of the Year episode.
And made it through the holidays safely. Now I need a vacation from that vacation.
I'm pretty relieved to be done with the holidays, and I think it's probably the case for a lot of people where their job just makes them, it doesn't make you hate the holidays, it just makes you wish that they would go quicker because you have so much work to do for the holidays. So I'm very glad that the holidays are over.
We definitely have, like, my job is always, the end of the month is a big push, and then this is going to be the end of the year as well. And then we kick off the work season in February with another big event at my job. So January is going to be hopefully a little bit quieter.
I hope so. It'll be a little bit of a lull. But nonetheless, yes, holidays are over. We're almost at the new year. It's going to be crazy that we're hitting 2025 in about, what is it, the next few days? Because we're recording just before New Year's Eve, essentially.
As of release of this, though, everybody, Happy New Year.
That's true. Happy New Year as release of this. So by this, it'll be January 3rd, I think you'll be getting this.
Yeah.
We're kind of doing something in the past and the future. So it's 2024 and we're recording this, but you'll be hearing this in 2025. So Happy New Year. It'll be great.
I guess Happy New Year, fingers crossed, because we don't know. Probably not looking too happy for the next few years.
It may be, but in general, I just put my head in the sand. And I'm pretty happy most of the time, so it works for me. I just kind of go about my business. See where we go.
We do know there's going to be a lot of great releases in 2025.
I do know that.
Not any specific dates,
exactly,
but sometime this
there's
year.
There's going to be a lot of good games this year. Yeah. So we're coming off the heels off our best and worst of 2024, and we had a great listener mail that came in from our friend Nick. He's a listener of the show here, and he says, "Hi guys, I love listening to your great podcast when I'm at work. I heard your new episodes discussing the game of the year, and here are my top 10 games for the year. I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas and keep up the great podcast." So, Nick, thank you for the email for one. It's always great to get mail or feedback from people who listen to us.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
yeah,
it's never too late for anybody else who has some opinions about our lists or what Nick's about to say.
Exactly. Stir the pot up. We like to hear things, So you can find us by email if you want to email us at legiongamingpod@gmail.com. And of course, we're primarily on Instagram at Legion Gaming Podcast. And we're also on Threads a little bit, but really Instagram's like the bread and butter of where we talk about things. So you can always reach out there. So Nick, we're going to read your top 10 list. I think it's a very great list here. There's a lot of fun stuff. So number 10 is Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth.
Oh, yeah.
It's another Yakuza sort of spin-off game. I haven't played it. I heard it's really, really good.
Was that the first Like a Dragon? Or
no, there was Like a Dragon.
There's been like a few already.
Yeah, I forgot. I think it was just called Like a Dragon. I forgot what it was on Xbox Series X. It was the JRPG.
Yeah.
I really, really love that one. I got 50 hours in and got stuck, though. So it got pretty hard at some point. So this is a spin-off of that series, and I heard a lot of great things about it. I haven't gotten to play it myself because these games are just beefy with a lot of distractions. They have these really great sort of melodramatic detective stories or like Yakuza stories in some of them.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with all the Yakuza series.
Yeah. I've played a few of them and yet to finish them, but they're a great series. Number 9 is The Wolf Among Us.
Oh, wow.
Which is, I still have to play that myself. I heard that one's really good.
That was one of my favorite Telltale games back in the day, and, not based on a really well-known property. But
yeah,
I do know. I think it's a graphic novel.
That one's had a bit of a cult status, I think, more than some of the other Telltale games. And a lot of people are wishing for a sequel, which I think has been sort of shot down, resurrected, shot down. I'm not sure where that's at, but that's an interesting one to put on his list. Number 8 is an oldie but goodie. It's Red Dead Redemption. I'm not sure if you played the remaster.
Wow. The first one?
Yes, the first game.
Nice.
So he's got the experience that. Number 7, he put Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is a good choice. Number 6, Persona 3 Reload. I think that's more of a remaster remake of Persona 3 that's on all modern consoles. It's also on Game Pass right now.
I think it's on, was it on PS Plus for a little bit?
It is on PS Plus, I thought. It might have been a freebie too at some point. And then he's got 2 back-to-back heavy hitters in my eyes here. He's got number 5, Simpsons Road Rage. That was the Crazy Taxi inspired Simpsons game.
Yes.
That was a good time back then. It wasn't better than Crazy Taxi, but it was the Simpsons, so it worked. Number 4, this is one of my favorites. It's Simpsons Hit and Run, the Grand Theft Auto clone that include the Simpsons that I wish would be remade or remastered in some way because
I played both of those a ton. I think I have them on GameCube.
Yeah.
At least I had Hit and Run on GameCube. I can't remember if I had Road Rage and maybe traded it in or not, but But both of
I
those,
do remember you had Road Rage.
Yeah.
I have it on PS2 and I have Hit and Run on Xbox, and I also have Simpsons skateboarding. So
I wonder. Oh boy, I wonder if Nick's played the Simpsons the game. What was that on? Like 360 and
yeah, 360 and PS3. It was
PS3.
out 2009, 2008 ish. That was a really great one.
That was a great
I
one,
know a
too.
lot of people are kind of tired because it's kind of a collectathon, but I love those games, so it was a great time.
And once again, it's the Simpsons.
It's
They
The
had
Simpsons, yeah.
plenty of clever lines and everything.
Yeah, so number 3 here is another great choice. It's Silent Hill 2 Remake, one that I also placed pretty high on my list. Number 2, he has Astrobot, which is another fantastic choice for the year. And at number 1, he has a choice that I think a lot of people put on their list as well, Metaphor Refantasio.
Oh yeah, you had that. Was it an honorable mention?
It was an honorable mention because unfortunately other games took my time away from it, but it's a really fantastic JRPG. I really enjoyed the time I did put into it.
Yeah, I saw that recently on other Game of the Year lists on like YouTube.
Yeah,
I think Digital Foundry had theirs, and somebody else did. And I've never really paid attention much to Persona, but this one looks interesting because it looks almost like Persona, but not in that storyline.
Yeah, like I said, I like the thing I like about this is that it's a little bit more mature with its theme in some instances because it's more of a medieval fantasy theme. Whereas Persona, I really like the sort of apocalyptic demon world that you can get into in that game, which is sort of the other side of the bad side of the game, where it's like you have the good side where you're just the teenagers, but then you also get in the minutia of like having teenage relationships and having to form bonds so that your party bond is stronger as well. And it just kind of gets to a point where I'm like, this is just a little bit too, it's teenage drama kind of stuff where it's like, it's hard for me to really get into the demon stuff that I love more than anything else, but I have to deal with this calendar management and like, having to go to classes and even take like tests.
It's like watching Smallville back in the day. You want to see Superman, but he's got a bunch of high school stuff to get through.
So it's I understand like the games are popular for good reason. It's just they're really hard for me to get into for that reason because I only put I think I got 15 hours into Persona 5 and I was just like, all right, this is just too much text. There's too much of the teen high school stuff. It's just a little bit of you're treading too much water before I get into the stuff I really love, which is the dungeons.
Yeah.
So Metaphor Refantasio streamlines a lot of that. I think you might enjoy it more, but I would definitely say like I'm having a hard time on normal in some instances because you have to grind. So anyone out there listening, don't be afraid to put it on easy or story mode. It's totally fine, especially if it means you get to experience the game.
That's sort of a theme going into today's topic, because these old school games that we're going to cover, they kind of punish you for putting it on easy.
They do.
And I was sitting there thinking about that, going, oh, thank God these games these days just let you play. Like they even have something lower than easy called story mode for a lot of games because so many games these days are like TV episodes or movies that you just want to experience. Like,
yeah.
They have great writing and great acting and you want to experience that and you don't want to have to repeat a certain section over and over again.
And also I think developers are also, games are also at a point in general where more older people are playing. I don't mean older. I mean like not kids, right? Because when we were kids, when we were kids and playing Nintendo, like they wanted to make the game hard so a kid couldn't beat it in a rental period. But now it's like gaming has so many different genres and so many players that they do make it realize that like people can invest 40, 60, 80 hours, grind and all that stuff in an RPG or something or another game. It's like it's perfectly fine to just play on story, enjoy the story.
Yeah.
And don't feel like you have to stress out because you won't finish it. You won't have time to finish it,
I mean, or you can go the route of like Black Ops or Call of Duty in general where their campaigns are shorter. So I played Black Ops 6 on normal and got through that just fine. I think I only died maybe a handful of times.
Yeah, it was pretty reasonable.
You get through that and move on to the next big game.
Yeah. So Nick, thank you again for your top 10 list and your letter. It was always really nice. And again, if anyone wants to reach out to us, that's at legiongamingpod@gmail.com. But before we get into today's topic, which is all about the Streets of Rage trilogy, actually, I guess we could set that up. What we're doing today is we're going to cover the Streets of Rage trilogy, and Deucy had this really cool idea because we've already covered some other beat 'em ups and some other sort of franchises that all kind of tie into beat 'em ups in some way or have had some sort of brand new game as part of the resurgence of beat 'em up. So we previously covered Power Rangers, pretty much, I'd say like pretty much all the games up until like PS1, I think it was.
All the Mighty Morphin stuff.
All the Mighty Morphin stuff.
Yeah.
We covered the entire NES and 16-bit era of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games. And today we're covering Streets of Rage because each of those games has a brand new game that came out within the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So we're going to do another episode later that covers the brand new games that were like, like we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge we're going to cover, Streets Rage 4, and the most recent one is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Reader's Rewind. But today we're covering Streets of Rage Trilogy, which I have a lot of fondness for. It's one of my favorite trilogies in gaming ever. So I'm pretty excited for this. And I also just love beat 'em ups in general.
Yeah.
But before we get to all that good stuff, Deucy, what have you been playing lately?
Well, since I got through Black Ops 6 and, got through our power outage issues and everything, I finally had time to sit down and play one game and one game only. He's a man you might know that travels the world, finding artifacts for museums when he shouldn't. Indiana Jones and what is it, The Great Circle?
The Great Circle.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good game.
Man, I really love that game. But I also found that it is going to be tough on me because I spent a whole day finally just relaxing and playing through it, and I didn't get out of the first city. Like, there's just so much to do, wander around, collect the secrets of the city, and then just collect other little, like medicine bottles were in one section that you have to turn in and get little items for. I love the perk upgrade system, because as you're doing certain, like, Indiana Jones-esque things, you get points for that, and then you get to be a better fighter, or be better at stealth, and that sort of thing. And yeah, all in all, it's just a really fun time.
Yeah, I ended up finishing it last weekend, and I had put quite a bit of time into it. I really loved it. I think it's where I put on my list, which is at number 9, is probably where it should settle. Because when I was playing, I was like, should I place this higher? Because when I made the list, I'd only played a couple hours because it had just come out, and then I was able to finish it up until then. I loved it. I do have some nitpicky issues with it, though. One is a game-breaking bug that forced me to go back 3 or 4 hours.
That's a little larger than a nitpick.
That's my largest issue, and even then, it's sort of I would say a rarity, because I was looking up online and there's only a few threads about it, and there's no fix. So what had happened is later on in the game, and this is what sucked, is I was almost near the end of the game. It was about 17 hours in, and you're in Southeast Asia, and you have to buy this breathing device that allows you to breathe underwater longer. So I bought that, which requires you to earn money, which is, you can find around the area, or like there's certain missions that will give you money, So I bought it, and for some reason it didn't register that I had bought it. So I had no more money to buy another one that was on the table. So I had to go, ransack a Nazi safe, got $2,000, and it turns out I can't buy the item that says I need, even though I have it in my hand.
Because it said you already bought it?
I already bought it, but then I didn't buy it. So there's no way for me to go back, because unfortunately, like Wolfenstein, because it's the same developer, there's only one save slot to this game, and one thing that is at least better than Wolfenstein is that there's rollback saves, so at least I had that. But there's only 3 sort of random points it set me, so I had to go back like 3 or 4 hours, because for an hour and a half I was trying to figure out some way to go backwards or re-trigger it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. So I was about to just quit the game and then just be mad. I was like, I'm just going to wait till it comes out on PS5. I'll finish it then.
Yeah.
So I rolled back the save, and by then I was just totally deflated to do anything. Because all my side quest progress before that, right, is gone. So it's like anything I did that. So it's like, I'm done. I'm just going to go through the game because there's not much left. And I loved it. I really did enjoy it. But I think, Egypt for me, which is a point you'll get to next. I think you're still at the Vatican, I'm assuming. Yeah. Which is like the first area. So the Egypt is a much more bigger place. It's a lot more open world, but it's not like, GTA level. And I feel like that's the weakest part of the game, because you're running all over the place because there's limited fast travel, right? It's like you're backtracking. It says like, go collect this. And it's like, I was just there.
Yeah.
Why wasn't that there and collectible when I was just there, So overall, like I said, I think it fits at number 9 on my top 10 list for the year. I think it's one of the best licensed games ever, though, already. Like, it's just really damn well made. It's just, like I said, I had a few nitpicky issues. I had a game-breaking bug that really ruined my experience at the end there.
You're just grumbling along at the end. You're like, I don't even care if I step on temple traps.
Yeah, I was just like rushing
just
through.
Get me through this.
Yeah, and the end of the game, like the last couple levels you'll play through are really straightforward. Like, there's no open world area necessarily, like it's really guided. So at least there's that, where it's like I wasn't forced to go through everything all over again and seek out in this massive open area. There's at least that. Yeah. But it still sucked nonetheless. But it was a great time.
I'm surprised you got hit with that. Usually that's always my luck.
Yeah.
With these games.
I was really salty too. I was like, 17 hours? And this is where it happens? Like, I turned off the Xbox the next day I tried, because I saw there was rollback saves, and luckily that saved me, because the 2 saves that were previous to mine had the glitch. So the only option I had was to go back. Yeah, so the only option I had to go back was 3 hours previous to that. So it is what it is.
Yep.
Just avoid what I did, Deucy. But that's the only game you've been playing lately?
Yeah, really. Oh, and the games that we're about to talk about today.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I wanted to
1, 2, and 3.
refamiliarize myself with that. Plus, I realized I don't think I'd ever really played 3 before.
I'd imagine a lot of people haven't, because that was definitely a late Genesis game. It was 94, so I think by then, a lot of people were either getting to the Saturn or PS1.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine that's the one that's more of a blind spot for most of us. But for what I've been playing, I haven't talked about that.
Oh, yeah.
Besides Indiana Jones, which I did love and played through, I also got into Sonic Cross Shadow or Sonic X Shadow Generations. I'm not sure how to pronounce the title or what it's technically pronounced right. It's just Sonic Shadow Generations. So this is a remake of the, I think it was 2013, 2012 Sonic Generations, where
I didn't realize it was a remake.
yeah, it's weird because you see Shadow and it's not very clear it's a remake.
Yeah.
But it is a remake, at least for the Sonic Generations part. So it still has everything that was in the original. It just looks a lot better. It runs amazingly well, of course, because the PS3 and 360 one only ran at 30 frames a second, which, a little limiting for Sonic.
Yeah, I didn't even notice when I played that.
Most people didn't, because there was, I don't think people were as, what's the word I'm looking for, sensitive to frame rates in that era, because not everything ran at 60 anyway. But now it's like the fidelity is so good, and I was just used to performance.
There was also a mixture of TVs back then. You could still have CRTs on a 360, or
true.
Or you could have flat screens, but they weren't as OLED as they are today.
Yeah, that's also true too. So the 360 one, if you play it on Series X, it's actually enhanced with they've doubled the frame rate, so it looks even better.
Nice.
It plays really well. I did get to beat it. I beat the game on that originally because I got through like half of it a decade ago. I was like, I just should just finish this, and it looks better anyway, right? So Sonic Shadow Generations, you still have the remake of Sonic Generations, and then Shadow's campaign is really awesome because it's almost like an open world Banjo-Kazooie kind of hub world. And there's, you unlock different zones, you play through them, and then you unlock these challenges, which give you a key, which you use to unlock boss doors. And the bosses are actually really freaking cool. Like, they really are just like, like these really high speed. Shadow uses all of his abilities. Like, you fight a bio lizard where it's like you have to avoid his attacks that he's shooting at you. And then you eventually jump up and climb up these enemies that are, leading to like his weak spot, and you start bashing on it. So it has like that phase thing, again, like Banjo-Kazooie or like some of those collectathons. And I've been enjoying it. Like, I was really surprised that it's an open world kind of game, but it works really, really well so far. Like, there's enough diversity and challenges in the area where it's like, it definitely varies what Sonic is used to, especially when you play Generations and how different that feels.
Yeah. Does Shadow ever get a gun in this?
I haven't
campaign?
gotten it yet. He gets a lot of cool abilities. Like, one, he ends up like he can coast on water on like this manatee thing. Like, you just run on water and all of a sudden it just appears. Or like there's one ability where he can start swinging from these orbs to go up these certain areas and whatnot.
Does he have his like slow-mo time thing?
He does,
Yeah.
which helps in a lot of sections in some of the levels, because the levels go really, really fast.
Yeah.
Because it's on PS5 and Series X, so it just goes 100 miles an hour. And it looks really amazing. It's also, a little bit hyped because I did see the Sonic 3 movie yesterday.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah, exactly. So
good timing.
You get a little bit of Sonic Fever, a little bit of Sonic Mania in there, right? So
Yeah.
it was perfect that I started that after Indiana Jones, because sometimes when I play like a longer game, I just feel like I have to play like a shorter, breezier game, just because it's almost like decompressing after investing so much time in a game.
This sounds a little deceptive, though. You think it's going to be a short game, and then you're like, oh, there's all this extra stuff.
Yeah, but it's like, the levels are like, minutes long.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the levels are only like a couple minutes. The challenges, most of them, it's like, might have to get through a level with only one ring, and you have a time limit. But it's pretty generous because, it's on a score. You either get an S rank or a D rank, right? And you only complete those so you get a key to unlock the boss. There's a really good gameplay loop, and I've been enjoying it so far, so I think I'm going to end up seeing this one through. And I've barely touched Generations because I've been playing the Shadow version most of the time. But I definitely recommend it. I got on sale for, I think it was like $25 on Amazon, and it's definitely worth it, especially if you love the original or even haven't played the original.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, where I played the original, but I only got about 3 or 4 levels in, I think. And I don't know, I just got sidetracked, and I think I had to like take it out to make space for some other game. And now that I have like the 1 terabyte extra for my Xbox, I'm putting all these other games back in.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to reload that one, or I have to get this new remade one and play it through that.
Either way, because the Sonic Generations that's on Xbox Live or whatever it's called now, the Xbox Store now, it's always on sale for like $4.
Yeah.
And I'd say, if you don't want to get Shadow Generations now, you can wait it out and pay $4. And like I said, it runs and looks really, really great for being a 360 game on the Series X. But I would also definitely recommend Shadow Generations.
Yeah, you might as well.
You may as well just
get a whole extra side game on it.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, DC. So let's get into the history of beat 'em ups and the Streets of Rage trilogy. All right, Deucey, we're here at our main events. We're talking beat 'em ups. One of my favorite genres ever. I think a lot of times when I think about sort of like my core genres when I was growing up, it was usually fighting games, some sort of shooter like Mega Man, like a platformer.
Oh, yeah.
And beat 'em ups and shmups. But beat 'em ups were kind of like my bread and butter if it wasn't a fighting game. I don't know if you had much experience with them growing up. Did you get to play much? I'd imagine you'll have some that we'll talk through here. But
only, I think, mostly at your house I would play them. Other than they had to be licensed characters for me to own it and really be interested. So like
that makes perfect sense.
All the Turtles games and Batman Returns on Super Nintendo, that was a great beat 'em up.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like random ones like Final Fight or Streets of Rage, I just waited to go over to your house and play them.
that makes perfect sense too.
Yeah,
Don will get them. It's fine.
Yeah.
So just for some clarity here, some of the notes I took here from there's a book company that I really love. I always try to give them some love. It's Bitmap Books. They make some really, really incredible books that are based, like they'll compile books on the NES library, the Super Nintendo library, a pixel book of different pixel art from the 16-bit era. And one of my favorite books they released is Go Straight, The Ultimate Guide to Side-Scrolling Beat 'em Ups, which is this really high-quality book that I'll probably post on Instagram, I'm sure. As of this recording, I haven't posted yet, but you'll see it on there. It goes for about $45 on their site, and I definitely recommend to buy directly through them, because with them, when you buy the hardcover book, they'll give you a free PDF that you can download and use on your tablet or wherever else. You don't get that with Amazon, plus, you're giving money directly to Bitmap Books, not Amazon.
Yeah.
So a lot of the notes that I took from our episode here were from that book. I definitely recommend getting it if you're a fan of beat 'em ups. But Deucey, I didn't even know this, but 1984's Kung Fu Master, also known as Spartan X in Japan, was the original beat 'em up. I was kind of I was thinking about this. I didn't know how beat 'em ups kind of started, because the earliest version I think I had played when I was a kid was Kung Fu, which is actually what Kung Fu Master is. So in 1984, they released it in arcades. It was considered to be the first beat 'em up. You play as a character named Thomas as he fights up 5 levels of the Devil's Temple to save his girlfriend from a crime boss named Mr. X, which is interesting because in Streets of Rage,
Mr. X is all over the place.
He's all over the place. He's just a violence and just a criminal.
He's a giant
criminal.
Tyrant in Resident Evil.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what game you're playing.
He's just a bad person.
There's going to be a Mr. X.
Exactly. So Kung Fu Master, this was actually a tie-in to Jackie Chan's Wheel on Meals. I haven't seen this movie.
No.
It's from the 80s. I haven't seen. It's one of the Jackie Chan movies where most main characters are named Thomas, and they all have a similar plot where he's going after to rescue his girlfriend. This would later be ported to the NES, which is where I played it. But I had no idea that this was a Jackie Chan tie-in.
No. In fact, for years, I didn't even know this game really existed. I was always seeing pictures of the black box collection for the NES, the first handful of games that came out for it. And I always thought Kung Fu was sort of like the start of the Street Fighter type of games where it's just one-on-one, back and forth. I never realized until maybe the YouTube era where I saw people playing it, and it was like go left, or actually I think these were go right.
Well, you would go right and then left, because you'd be climbing up a tower, so it's like one level might be to the right and you go up then left, right? It was a pretty basic side-scrolling beat 'em up, but that's also just what beat 'em ups were at the time, especially when you're the first one to do it.
Yeah,
right?
you didn't have the isometric view or anything. It was literally just side scroller like Mario,
Yeah, just
except
left to right.
punches and kicks.
And yeah, it's all based on martial arts. So the belt-scrolling format, which is really just what Streets of Rage is based on, the belt-scrolling format was introduced in 1986 with Taito and Technos Japan's Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun. I don't know how to properly pronounce that. It's just my best go at that.
That looked good.
Thank you,
good
dude.
too.
You validated it.
Yeah.
This was also known as Renegade in the United States, which is an arcade game that you probably have heard of Renegade.
Yeah.
I'm sure you might have seen it. But this format, Renegade uses this format where the camera is at a downward angle, and that allows the player to move up and down as well as left and right. So it adds almost like another dimension because now you're going up on that vertical axis versus just left to right like Kung Fu was. And that will really be sort of the originations of belt scrollers and sort of the modern beat 'em up was with Renegade. And Renegade also kind of used a revenge themed plot that would later be popular in all these beat 'em ups, and sort of they would also popularize the contemporary urban settings, which is a theme we'll see in like, again, virtually every beat 'em up of the early 90s. There's always some streets to clean up, and there's always something bad going on in these alleyways.
Man, I didn't know Renegade was before Double Dragon.
Me neither.
I always kind of thought Double Dragon was like the first.
That's what it felt like for me, because like I said, I had played Kung Fu, but when I was a kid, I had no relativity to time. I didn't know what was released first. It was just based on what I played, right?
Yeah.
And I always knew Double Dragon, which we can get into now. This was released in 1987, but also by Technos Japan. And this would define beat 'em ups even further because this introduced two-player co-op and also a continuous belt scroll format where the level would scroll as you go along, like you couldn't really go back and you would progress forward.
Yep.
So that I think really is what modernized beat 'em ups and what sort of set the boilerplate and the template for what beat 'em ups would become, because we played that on the Nintendo. It was a really awesome experience even with two people. It was brutally difficult.
It was even more in depth than I realized back in the day because you got those little points to level up, and then suddenly you had a new move, but it didn't tell you that on screen. You just had to know.
Yeah, and I think the manual did say a few moves, but also it's like if you had the manual.
Yeah.
If you rented it, which I remember playing at Vito's house. I don't think we had the manual. It's just a matter of like figuring it out, and I wasn't even sure if it was correct. It would just happen, right?
Yeah.
So 1987 we had Double Dragon, and then after that, that's really just when everything blew up. Like it's just like we had a whole list of games even before Streets of Rage. Streets of Rage came out in 1991, which feels like a later beat 'em up. I almost thought this game would have come out, like in 88, or not, actually wouldn't have been 88 because Genesis was 89. So I thought it would have been like 90, somewhere around there.
Yeah, when I played these kind of back to back and I looked at the difference between 1 and 2, 1 very much feels like almost like a launch game for the Genesis.
It feels primitive in some ways.
Yeah, they made
a
lot of improvements by 2 because that was how the whole genre was going.
Yeah. So before Streets of Rage, there's quite a few games that were released. I highlighted a few here. We got the Ninja Warriors, which that also got sort of a remake on. It was ported on Super Nintendo and also got a remake on Switch. I think we were talking about that like way back.
Oh yeah, I keep wanting to play that and then I always forget about it.
It's pretty cool.
Or forget the name of it.
It's a pretty gorgeous game. There's also Splatterhouse, Altered Beast, which was a favorite of mine growing up, Ninja Gaiden, the arcade version. There's a ton of Double Dragon games that came out. There was Battletoads, Teenage Mutant Turtles, Ninja Turtles. That was a huge one for us. Final Fight came out in 1989. Golden Axe, X-Men the arcade game, Simpsons arcade game, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, and just countless other beat 'em ups. If you went to the arcade in the early 90s, you would find a beat 'em up almost every other machine, it seemed like.
I've never considered Moonwalker a beat 'em up.
I should specify the
it's like a dance off.
The arcade is more beat 'em up,
yeah.
And then even the Genesis one is still a beat 'em up. It's just really weird because you almost use the power of music to kill enemies or just bash them. They don't even really kill. Yeah. So that one is technically considered a beat 'em up, even though it's kind of goofy.
It's also funny. I saw this list and you had Ninja Gaiden on there, and I like. It was sort of this like glass shatter in my head moment where I'm just like, oh, that's right. I've never considered Ninja Gaiden really a beat 'em up, except it is.
It really is. I think we consider more like on an action platformer kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, at its core, it really is kind of a beat 'em up, and it's based on the arcade version, which is just the same. Like that was considered beat 'em up as well. Again, so beat 'em ups had a pretty great history before Streets of Rage, and Streets of Rage finally released on September 18th, 1991 by Sega. It's known as Bare Knuckle in Japan. This was also ported to the Game Gear, Master System, 3DS, and just tons and tons of collections over the last couple decades. At time of release, arcade brawlers were just being completely dominated by Konami and Capcom. And this game was widely known for its very distinct style and vibe that was completely unique at the time. we talked about how a lot of games have this urban theme and just this bright alleyway thing. Like there's all these vigilantes and bad guys, and Streets of Rage very much does that as well. But I think it adds a little bit more like 90s flair and neon to it, so it makes it a little bit more.
I was gonna say it feels a little darker.
Yeah, that's also true too.
Yeah, it feels like you're
tone
doing
and vibe.
You're doing more at night. My direct comparison probably would be Double Dragon on the NES or Final Fight, and both of those seem to take place a lot during the day.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of those were daylight levels, they weren't really night levels. And this also has some really cool graphical effects where, like, you see like newspaper and paper flying through, like the wind. Pretty impressive for a Genesis game back then. At least I thought it was. So again, Konami and Capcom were just totally dominating the arcades at the time, and Sega just wanted to do their own kind of beat 'em up.
It didn't even dawn on me back then, when we were younger, that Konami and Capcom weren't doing this. Like, this just felt like another beat 'em up by one of those companies that always did beat 'em ups.
Exactly, and also back then you couldn't really place most of them. Again, if you weren't Konami or Capcom, I couldn't tell you what was a Data East beat 'em up or a Sega beat 'em up most of the time. Like you might be able to tell, but it's not as distinct as a Konami or Capcom game, really. So the working title of this game was D-SWAT because it was going to be in the same universe as another Genesis game called E-SWAT City Under Siege. I looked this up because I had seen the cover. It's really unique. It almost looks like a guy, like a cop with his face is split with almost like a cyborg side, which is kind of cool. But this game looked like Rolling Thunder, where it's a side-scrolling shooter. So it's not necessarily a beat 'em up. There's a lot of those foreground gimmicks where it's like you're walking through like a prison, and like the front side has like the prison bars and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
it looked really cool. And there's also a mode where you can fly in like a mech. For I don't know what the story connection is, but it looked really cool. So you can definitely tell this game was in that same universe. I'm talking about Streets of Rage and E-SWAT, because even the cop car in Streets of Rage that you summon is from E-SWAT. That's how close this game was going to be a sequel to that.
Yeah, E-SWAT was on the Sonic Sega collection, like way back on the Xbox 360 and stuff.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of it until that collection, and I played a little bit of it. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. But also hard, like all the games back then.
Yeah, I gotta pick it up because I saw it's only like $25, which is pretty reasonable for a Genesis game. And I know it's an older one, but I was like, that's cool. That's a reasonable pickup, $25, $30.
Yeah, for a good shooter.
Yeah, for sure. And this game was inspired by shows like Starsky and Hutch and the A-Team, which I think you could also see just in terms of like the story. And then the game was also designed for two players to work together to avoid being swarmed by enemies, which, if you play this game on single player, you could see that's pretty damn true right off the bat, because this game is pretty freaking hard when we get into it.
Yeah, now that I think about it, you kind of go along like normally, and you think you've got a good handle on it, and then all of a sudden 3 or 4 come out at once, and you just start to get punched from both sides.
Yeah.
And the way they do it is like you have no recovery, and you don't really have a dodge, so you're just gonna eat the punches.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty tough. Yeah. One note, or one person I want to talk about, because he's gonna be a recurring name as we get through each of the games here, is Yuzo Koshiro. He's a very notable composer. He's one of my personal favorite composers, and he's often regarded as one of the most influential innovators in chiptune and game music. He's produced music across tons of different genres like rock, jazz, symphonic, house, techno, hip hop. He's a really diverse composer. And he formed a development company with his sister in 1990 called Ancient. His sister's name is Ayano Koshiro, and she's also a pretty key person in Streets of Rage 2 when we get into it. But I want to shout him out because he's created music for tons of early games, and even today he's still making music in games. He has a new game coming out in 2025 called Eartheon. It's going to be on the Genesis, and it's also for modern consoles. There's going to be a physical version by Limited Run Games, and it looks like a shoot 'em up that he's developing with his company, and of course he's composed the music. It looks excellent, but from my purposes, he's created one of the best soundtracks in gaming with Streets of Rage 2, which we'll get into. So I just wanted to note him because, like I said, he's going to be a big key player throughout the entire series, including the Streets of Rage 4 in some ways.
Did he do 1?
He did. He did all 3. What else did he do? He did like the Ease series, Revenge of Shinobi. He's done ActRaiser on Super Nintendo. He composed the music for Sonic the Hedgehog on Game Gear and Master System.
Oh wow!
Batman Returns, Super Adventure Island, Shenmue, and just tons and tons of stuff. Like I'd wager a lot of the big games you might have played, he's probably had some hand in the music in some way.
That's interesting because the 3 Streets of Rage games, these trilogy ones, they seem to have a different sound in each of them, or different music.
They do. They all have their own very distinct style, even though it's one, it's a couple of composers with them, but they all sound different. And I think there's some pluses and minuses to some, which we'll get into. But overall, all three soundtracks, without getting to everything, they're really, really strong, especially for, I know you're critical of the Genesis a lot of times, but Koshiro and his team they made the Genesis sound like nothing else with the soundtracks with these three games.
No, I think I mentioned it way back on like the Aladdin episode, where Sega, I don't usually prefer their sounds, but when it came to like Streets of Rage, because it was only for Sega and they knew what they were working with, he did a great job with all of these.
I think that's what's key, is that when you have multiple, when you're porting a game from multiple consoles, right, you're gonna develop and do whatever you can with them. But when you're making a game specifically for a console, you're going to use its hardware to whatever potentially you can, and that's why I think all three of these games are successful, at least from a music standpoint, is because like you said, like they're just tailor made for the Genesis and its sound chip. So the story of Streets of Rage, it's a basic beat 'em up story, so I guess we won't dive too much into it. The idea here is that the city's been taken over by a crime syndicate led by Mr. X, and crime has risen as a result of his syndicate that's literally called the Syndicate. And he's essentially bought the city's government and police. So three officers, Adam Hunter, Axel Stone, and Blaze Fielding, they attempt to create a task force within the police to take on the Syndicate, but they're denied by their dirty superiors who are in the pocket of Mr. X. And they decide to resign from the force, and they take to the streets as vigilantes to take down Mr. X, which is just a fantastic story. But I love in the opening crawl of this game, it says, they're willing to risk anything, even their lives, on the Streets of Rage.
Yeah.
It's such like a heavy-hitting 80s line.
That would be so cheesy and good if it was voice acted too.
It would be. I wish. Yeah.
That's what kind of struck me with this, is that this is such an 80s or 90s action movie, and yet they never made a movie on it. They chose instead like Double Dragon and Street Fighter.
Yeah.
When this was
interesting.
This was already set up. It didn't have to be Oscar worthy, but it could definitely be like a B movie kung fu action beat 'em up type.
It's like
movie.
they could have got even Dolph Lundgren as Axel. They could have got Carl Weathers as Adam Hunter.
Yeah.
It could have been a really easy, cheesy 80s movie, and it would have worked really, really well.
Yep.
So it's surprising that given this story and as cut and dry as it is, that it wasn't some TV or TV movie of the week.
I even pictured one scene paying homage to the game where like a police officer in a really slick car comes out and fires a rocket launcher for no reason, really, like because just you want an explosion in an 80s or 90s movie, and like I said, it would pay homage to the special move in this game.
Yeah, and it would look amazing in the 80s too. Like they would make that thing the most ridiculous explosion you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, because it would all be practical.
Yeah. All right, dude, so let's get into some review scores, and we'll get into some impressions of the first game. So we have GamePro issue 27 from October 1991. These are all out of 5, so they gave graphics a 5, sound a 5, gameplay a 5, fun factor 5, challenge 4.5. This is one of those old reviews where they're grading on like 5 different metrics, which is pretty crazy. Overall, they said they called it a fighting-like game because I guess at this point, beat 'em ups hadn't been sort of defined necessarily, at least from what I can understand, because EGM also called this a fighting-like game or a fighting game. So I just wanted to point that out because I thought that was interesting. GamePro loved the 3 distinct characters and their movesets. They love the weapons, and they said 2-player is an absolute blast. EGM reviewed this issue 25, August 1991. These are out of 10, so they gave it a 9, 9, 9, and a 9, which is just stellar scoring. It says it blows away the other beat 'em ups with superb graphics and more forms of attacks. They referred to it as a fighting game, like I said, which was different.
I think it's because fighting games hadn't really come on the scene yet.
Not really, because it was very limited. Street Fighter 2 hadn't come out just yet. I think it had just come out around this time. It was July 91.
Yeah, it would have been very fresh.
Yeah, really fresh. So they considered it a fighting game, which is, again, really bizarre to me.
I mean, you are fighting.
Technically, yeah. I guess that's true. Let's see. One reviewer was blown away and said it puts other games, including Final Fight, to shame. They noted 40 attacks, 8 levels, and huge bosses, and music that rivals Sonic, which I'd say that's not too far off the mark, frankly. Like Sonic has amazing music, and Street Fighter 1 still has really good music. Also of note, Super Mario World was reviewed this issue. It was called Super Mario 4 at this time, and that got a 9, 9, 9, and 9 out of 10. And also, they reviewed Final Fight on Super Nintendo. It got an 8, 7, 7, and a 7. Looks and feels like the arcade, but no 2-player. Gameplay was easy and short. noted Guy was missing, who's a character in Final Fight. He was completely gone from the Super Nintendo version for hardware limitations. And all 4 reviewers hated the removal of co-op, and they said Streets of Rage figured it out, so they didn't understand why Final Fight didn't.
That is interesting because Super Nintendo, I mean, was kind of known for co-ops by then.
Yeah, and my thing, because there's always an internet argument of like what's better, Streets of Rage or Final Fight.
Yeah,
I've always been firmly planted in the Streets of Rage camp, even though I think people will kind of use the arcade version of Final Fight to say it's better. And even the arcade version, as much as I love that one, I don't think I like as much as Streets of Rage, especially Part 2, right? But Final Fight, I think, when I rented it back then, I still think it's a gorgeous Super Nintendo game. But you're right, like it sucks that when not most, that's kind of too general, but a lot of the games you play on Super Nintendo with your buddy were 2-player in some way, whether it's co-op, alternating, whatever. And one of the biggest features of a beat 'em up in Final Fight was playing with 2 players in the arcade game and choosing from 3 characters. And unfortunately, the Super Nintendo version, as gorgeous as it looks, has no third character and no co-op.
It doesn't make any sense because what is it? Turtles in Time is probably around this same time.
Yeah, probably roughly around. Yeah.
That definitely had co-op too.
Yeah, it did. And I think again, like when you look at the sprites compared to Turtles, at least, like they're definitely bigger in Final Fight. But I think I was a kid. I think I would have been fine and not even noticed if they had to scale some enemies down or something, or just whatever compromise you had to make to get 2-player. That should have been their priority. But it's weird that. Not weird, but I guess Capcom thought that it was a better idea to make it a single-player experience, which beat 'em ups can be kind of hard to get into solo sometimes.
Depending on the
for
game. Sure.
Yeah.
I think wasn't Double Dragon 1 on Nintendo? It wasn't even co-op.
No, that was 2-player.
That was?
Yeah, I remember Vito and I playing.
Guys,
yeah, right. So even
they
then
couldn't even do it after that.
So I remember you could play as Jimmy. I don't want to say Bimmy.
Billy.
Yeah, Jimmy and Billy. I almost said Bimmy. Like I almost said it without catching myself.
Yeah,
Jimmy and Billy. And I remember, it was red and blue, just like it was. And I remember playing that with Vito back then too. Like again, that was a different experience. But yeah, Final Fight and Super Nintendo. Really weird that there's no co-op and no third character. So I think this review of the 8s and the 7s. Pretty fair, if maybe a little generous with no co-op, right? Like,
that is actually kind of surprising.
They could have given it 6s, and I probably wouldn't have been upset about that either. Yeah. All right, Deucy. So let's get into some of our impressions for Streets of Rage 1 before we jump into 2. What did you think of this one? Like, had you played this much? I imagine you didn't play as much as a kid either, because I didn't play this as a kid either. I couldn't find it.
No, I remember only playing 2 at your house the most, and then I played 1 when the collection started coming, like that one on 360, and then the more recent Sega Master Collection, which is where I've been playing all of these to prepare myself for the episode. And because there was such a gap in time, I always thought like 1 and 2 were very similar until I played them back to back here. And I was like, holy crap.
It's pretty major.
This is very primitive. Like the enemies don't even have life bars. It's a lot slower. The special move is, like I said, that cop with a rocket launcher instead of like your character doing a move. The sound effects were a little off too. It didn't feel like a real beat 'em up yet.
Yeah, definitely. Like in Streets of Rage 2, each weapon has sort of a distinct sound, and Streets of Rage 1, that's missing. I mean, not missing, but it's just not there.
Yeah.
The sprites are a lot smaller. I noticed in this game too, because I had played it. I think it was like around PS2 when all those Sega collections started to come out. I think it was about then, because that's when Sega stopped producing, start making hardware and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they were porting their old games to everything. So I played this on like PS2 or something, and that was the first time. And my relation was I had played Streets of Rage 2 to death when I was a kid, and basically all throughout my life. I'd rented Streets of Rage 3 back then, so that I had a little bit more familiar with that. And when I played Streets of Rage 1, that's why I felt like you said, it almost felt like a Genesis launch game.
Yeah.
Because it did look like, at least for graphically, it looked kind of primitive. Like it looked like much smaller. The levels, while they looked nice, they weren't very distinct from the characters. Like there's not a lot of contrast between background and characters, right?
It was very basic too. The left to right, you could go up and down on the walking plane, but there wasn't that much that like got in your way. There wasn't a whole lot of up and down where the whole camera moves up or down. It was very basic.
Yeah. And this game, so just to be quick about it, there's 8 levels. I've only gotten to like 5 because this game is freaking brutal on just single player on normal. It's really freaking hard. I don't know what your experience was, Deucy. Did you get through much of this at all when you played it? Not
this most recent time. I was just trying to get the feel of it. Back then, when I first played it, I want to say I got to the bridge, but maybe that ship. But I'd have to see a screenshot to really remember.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, you could definitely manage all the enemies in here, but I think where the game really just my biggest negative point, I will say, is the bosses in this game, because they are very cheap. They hit very hard, and they're sometimes hard to chase because you walk so slow.
Oh God, yes, I did notice that. There's a guy with, I think he's in this first one. There's a guy with claws.
Yeah, he's the second or third boss.
Yeah,
he almost looks like Freddy, and he is freaking hard.
It's ridiculous. He has this like shadow move, so that even if you get up close to him, he'll supposedly move very quick, and then he gets iframes, and you're just like, well, that was pointless.
And I noticed he would do that a lot when I would jump, because you can only walk. You have one walk speed. And I would try to jump to get close to him, and he would do that that shadow, almost dodge move, shadow step. And it's like, Jesus, I must have lost like 4 lives on that. And then the level after that, you fight. He's like this sort of like really heavy guy who breathes fire. He's bald.
Oh yeah,
and he moves in a diagonal pattern, and he just bowls right through you, takes all your health. So that's really my biggest negative about Street Fighter 1, and I can't really be hard on it because it's it's a 1991 beat 'em up. Is the bosses? They're really freaking hard. Like, you really need 2-player in this game.
What I don't understand is, like, these were never out in arcade, were they?
No, these are all
So why
ports.
do they always make a beat 'em up a quarter muncher when some of them aren't even in arcades?
Well, it's like, one thing, it's like, I wish we would at least have done infinite continues, because that's what sucks, is like when even if you set your lives to 5, and there's a cheat code you can use that'll get you 9 lives.
This one doesn't have that option even. Like, you're going to have to use a code.
Oh, I thought I had level select.
No, it only, it has your difficulty setting, but it doesn't have the lives counter like it does in 2 and 3.
Oh, I thought it did. Oh, I thought it was in the options to toggle it. Oh, I thought I had 5 lives or something.
Yeah, because I was trying to do that, and the other 2 had it, and I was like, oh no. But I did notice in this one, it felt a little easier to get 1-ups throughout the level.
Yeah, the score threshold is smaller. I didn't take note of it. I don't know if it was like 30,000 or something like that, but there's pickups on the ground that, of course, give you bonus points for, and you kill enemies, you get bonus points. It's at least reasonable in that respect, but the bosses are just they feel like core munching bosses.
They're gonna take up a lot of your lives. At one point, I think I had up to 6, and like I said, that claw guy knocked about 4 of them off.
Exactly, that's exactly my experience. Yeah. So one thing I want to get into before we move on to 2, this actually has a pretty cool twist ending in some ways. So at the end of the game, you're offered the chance to join the Synod, because again, you're a vigilante at this point, and if you refuse, you defeat Mr. X and restore peace to the city, which is obviously the canon ending, because you don't want to have these vigilantes fighting through all these bad guys and saying, "Yeah, I'll join you. It's cool."
Yeah.
The twist is that if you accept, it's revealed to be a trick, and you're sent back to the factory to go back up the tower to fight Mr. X. But the cooler twist is when you're doing 2-player, where if one player accepts Mr. X's offer and the other refuses, both of you fight to the death, basically.
Oh, nice.
And then if you beat the person who accepted Mr. X's request, like they're dead, then you fight Mr. X. Otherwise, if the other player beats you, then they take over the syndicate. So it's kind of a cool twist ending that wasn't very common at the time. Most of the times, it's like if you got to the end based on your $10 a quarters, you'll get a couple screens. So it's cool that they thought to add a little bit of extra, especially with a 2-player mode. That's very, very unique, that you would have a choice and both of you can make the alternate choice and fight each other.
I mean, that kind of plays off of the Double Dragon ending where
that's right,
Billy and Jimmy fight at the very end. Yeah, but that wasn't a choice. And this one, that one's very interesting. I would have probably, like back in the day, I probably would have said, no, I'm not going to join you. I'm the good guy. And now these days I would have been like, no, let me join up and I'll take over for you. Wait a minute. Why am I back at level 1?
You'll be the guy who gives the politicians their paychecks or something. Like, here you go. Here's your allowance for the week, sir.
Like I said, way back in when I finished Outer Worlds, I ended up being like this shadow boss behind the scenes of everything.
It's funny what 30 years of perspective will do to you, Deucy.
If you can't beat them, join them.
Join them. Then beat them. I heard that on a cartoon. I think it was Arthur once, actually. If you can't beat them, join them, then beat them. I was like, that's kind of an interesting thing to teach kids, All right, Deucy. Now we're getting to my favorite game of the trilogy, and one of my favorite games of all time, really. Street Fighter H2 for the Sega Genesis, released December 15th, 1992 by Sega. Once again known as Bare Knuckle 2 in Japan, and this was also ported to the Game Gear and Master System. And there's a 3DS version because 3DS got these really cool 3D versions of some Genesis classics. And unfortunately, I missed the boat on those because the eShop is gone, and now you cannot get these at all. They were digital only as far as I could tell. There's no physical version, so they're lost to time unless you pirate, which some people might do. I might do. I don't know. The Game Gear port, just a quick note on that. That's actually a really great port of this game. That was one I had on Game Gear, and I played a ton of because it's actually a very good scaled down version of this game.
Oh man, I think I've seen that recently at one of the shops we go to.
It's worth buying. I need to buy another copy because I think my brother has mine. But that was one of my favorite Game Gear games, bar none, back then. So for Streets of Rage 2, Koshiro's sister from Ancient, Ayano Koshiro, she was the lead graphic designer and planner of the game design team, and she also designed graphics, characters, and the combat mechanics.
She didn't work on the first one though, right?
I don't know if she had contributed much. That's the thing. I'd imagine she had some hand in it, but it seems now like she shifted more forward role.
Yeah, I mean, she took the ball and ran with it on the second one.
She did. Like, Jesus Christ, this game, like, you want to talk about sequels that are proper sequels? This is everything a sequel should be to and all through it. It's really amazing. So Ancient, I'm speaking to the development company here.
Yeah.
Apparently rewrote much of the game engine, which resulted in smoother gameplay and larger sprites and expressive animations, which you could definitely tell in the first freaking screen. Just the graphical fidelity and the increase over 1 is huge. It's drastic. And this is only a year later. It's not like this was a generation later, 2 years later. This was less than a year later that they came out with this one.
I was impressed with the first one that it had a lot of the moves that I didn't think it would have. And then the second one took those and ran with it and like really upped what you could do. Like I got grabbed from behind and then I did that front flip thing.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, whoa, where did that come from?
A lot more options. And I think that's largely because Yuzo and Ayano were heavily inspired by Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
So they had a cabinet in their office and they said that Street Fighter 2 also influenced Streets of Rage 2's combat system. So for me, that makes perfect sense because I love both of those games. Like, those are just core games from when I was a kid. And it makes perfect sense that they kind of go hand in hand with each other, that one inspired the other, because Streets of Rage 2 may not be like a Street Fighter game, but the combat sure still feels like it could be one.
The sound effects, too, feel really influenced by it because now it really feels like you're hitting somebody.
Everything is impactful. Everything has like a sharp sound. We're doing an episode in a couple weeks for iconic game weapons, and one of the weapons I'm putting on there is a lead pipe from Street Rage 2. Because when I was a kid, like...
You know, I thought about that too,
Did
actually,
you?
yeah.
So, God, yeah, so that pipe just has such a just deafening sound when you bop somebody. Like, my brother and I would just get the pipe and just beat the crap out of everybody in that game because it just sounded so satisfying. Like, you just want to beat up on these bad guys with that pipe. So it makes sense, you know, that everything was just increased. Everything was dialed up to 11 is how I'll put it. And also, Yuzo, for the composition of this game, he used a PC-88 home computer, and he developed his own programming language to compose the music, which I find to be just mind-blowing to me that you could develop your own your own coding language to create music. He called it Music Macro Language, and it's a heavily modified version of BASIC, which is a coding language that I don't know much of because I haven't done it in like 20 years. He also used this same hardware for like Batman Returns on Game Gear and Shinobi 2. And then he also used this music macro language for all the Streets of Rage games, up until I think even 4 might have used it in some way. And the Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack, it was heavily influenced by house techno and hardcore techno and breakbeat music. You could definitely tell by that. Like, just to me, this, like I said, this is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. And this soundtrack is widely considered to be revolutionary and well ahead of its time at the time, which I cannot overstate.
Yeah, I don't usually pay much attention to the music in beat 'em ups, except when they like get in your head. Like, a lot of the Ninja Turtle music will stick with me. When I replay the game, I'm like, oh, I remember this. Same goes with Streets of Rage 2. Like, there was a couple levels that I got to that I all of a sudden had flashbacks to playing at your house back when we were little.
Yeah, right? Yeah. That's what I love about it, too. Beyond the fact that this was a game I played a ton of, but I listen to the soundtrack pretty regularly. Like, some of the tracks, I'm sure I'm going to be spicing them in the podcast, like at certain points, you know. But it's one of my favorites ever. And like, there's, you know, even the opening track is amazing. Go Straight, which, you know, is what the book is named from, right?
Yeah.
That book I was talking about. And Slow Moon, which is when you're on the boat. Like, it just has that melodic, almost a ballad techno, right? The music in here, there's 8 or 9 levels, and all the music is really diverse.
And once again, it feels like it could fit into a movie based on this.
Yeah, it's just, I cannot stop loving how much, or stop talking about how much I love this freaking game. It's truly one of the best ever. So Streets Rage 2 also has a larger moveset in the first game, which we talked about, you and I. Each character has multiple signature moves, and now there's a charging move where you hold punch. That all that really does is it uses the last hit in your combo string. It's just a shortcut to that.
Oh,
which I don't know if you knew about that.
Did not know about that.
Yeah. Now you know, 30 years later.
Holy
I knew
crap.
about that back then because we found it by accident is what it was. I don't think there's really much of an advantage. It's just the last hit, so you might get a little bit more range. You know
what I did find in this, though, is it doesn't have a dash like in Streets of Rage 3.
No.
But it does have the dash. Well, I play as Blaze. It has her dash attack without dashing.
Yeah, it's called a blitz move because it's forward and attack.
Yeah.
So everyone has, like Axel has a grand upper. I forgot what Skate has. Does he have... I think it's like a twisty jump thing, right?
Maybe.
Oh, no, he has a flip forward thing. That's what it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He has a flip forward thing, and Blaze has another sort of flip dashy thing, right?
Flips forward. She flip kicks and punches.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a testament to the diverse moveset of this, because they also have a back hit where you hit B and C together and you hit behind you.
Oh, I noticed that too. I was kind of panicking because I was getting surrounded, and all of a sudden I hit behind me.
Exactly.
I was like, oh, thank God.
And also the special moves which drain your health, which is a common thing in beat 'em ups. There's one where it's neutral, where you hit A, and it's just usually that's sort of like an attack that clears the immediate radius around you, so it's to get people off you for swarms.
Yeah.
Like Skate will have one where he spins on his back. It's like a breakdance move. Blaze has like a backward flash kick kind of thing, and Axel has, I don't know if it's actually called a chicken wing. I always call it a chicken wing, but it's like this weird spinny punch where he just clears everyone around you.
Yeah,
and
I remember that.
They'll have a forward special, which is a little bit more direct and does more damage, but it only really focuses on one enemy, or I think Blaze can hit multiple enemies with hers.
Yeah.
So it's really fun because you mix that up with the rest of the combat moves, and this game is just a freaking joy to play. The story in here, we'll get through this real quick. This is 1 year after Streets of Rage 1. Blaze receives an emergency call from Skate, who is Adam's brother, and Adam's been kidnapped by Mr. X. He's been given a photo of Adam chained up to a wall, and Mr. X is standing over him, and now these vigilantes are out to go get Mr. X and rescue Adam in this one. The 4 characters set out on a rescue mission with to find Mr. X and rescue Adam, and then the ending shows the team leaving in a helicopter after Mr. X is defeated. So this one's a little bit more cut and dry. There's no twist to the end like the first game where you have multiple two characters, right?
It reminds me of Donkey Kong Country, where the second one, Donkey was kidnapped and you can't play as him.
It's very much like that.
Yeah. So if Adam was your favorite in the first one, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Although, to be honest, like Skate, I think is a much more cooler character anyway. Yeah. Like he's so much more fun to play. And like he's on rollerblades, so he's already kind of speedy.
I remember playing as him a lot back in the day.
My brother did a lot.
But more recently, I played as Blaze in all of these because she was just quicker, even if the game was slow.
She always felt like she was in sort of the middle ground as far as abilities. Like she didn't hit the hardest, and she was quick, but not the quickest, except for Streets Rage 1. But Streets Rage 2 and beyond, like she's always like that middle ground character. Has a lot of versatility because she's just all around. She's kind of like the Ryu of this game in some ways, right? Review scores, real quick here. Game Pro issue 43, February 1993. Graphics got a 5 out of 5, sound a 5, control 4.5, fun factor 5. They were critical over the lack of defense in the combat, which I found to be a little bit unfounded considering you have a few options. Like you have the back hit we just talked about. You have the neutral special that gets people off you.
Oh, yeah, but compared to modern days with their dodges, like it was... You were going to tank some hits too.
Well, I don't even think many beat-em-ups had dodge moves back then, like or blocking or anything. Like this. This had the most defense of those kind of games.
Oh no, it doesn't come till 3. 3, you get a little rolling dodge if you do up or down.
You do,
down.
yeah. But I mean, at this time in 1992, early 93, I don't think many beat-em-ups had many defensive options at all, since they were meant to eat your quarters.
Yeah,
those cheap hits were free, But they did praise the larger sprites. They thought the graphics and music were amazing. They appreciated the dual mode for its novelty, but it lacked depth, which I think is a totally fair thing. Like I played dual mode when I was a kid with my brother and my friend Alex, and it's just sort of one-on-one fighting mode, but it's still confined to the combat of Streets Rage 2. So it's also on basic.
Is it on the planes, like where you can move up and down? And oh yeah, that could get annoying.
Yeah, exactly.
I can picture your brother just running around the arena.
He probably did that. I would not put that past him whatsoever. I'm sure he did that. Bob, if you're listening, I know you probably did that.
Yeah,
and he'll confirm it too. He'll text me like, "Oh yeah, I definitely did that."
And I taunted you the entire time.
Exactly. And usually, we cover EGM and Nintendo Power, but we can't cover Nintendo Power because this isn't on Nintendo at all. And EGM somehow didn't review this game. So I looked through September 1993 all the way through July 1993. didn't find a review for Streets of Rage 2, which I find to be pretty baffling, even though they did a preview for it in November 1992. The only thing I found was a review for the Game Gear version in July 93, and that got 8s across the board. There was 4 8s, which I think is a fantastic score for that port.
Yeah, for a Game Gear game. That seems really high. I'd imagine that this one would have been 9s or 10s. I don't know if they had 9.5, but like, it should really be up there.
I'd imagine like EGM would have definitely for me, this is a 10 out of 10 game. Bias aside.
They ranked the first one 9s, and this was only improvements
this
all
is
across.
Even better. Like there is, I mean, even compared to other beat-em-ups at the time, like Final Fight 2, I think had come out, and that was just a fart in church to me because it was not fun. Like it was such a downfall from Final Fight 1 even. It was just not as fun, and they did have co-op, but it just didn't. I don't know, like certain beat-em-ups, the way they pick you up and hook you, some games just don't have it, and Final Fight 2 didn't. So I'd imagine if EGM did review Streets of Rage 2 for whatever reason they didn't, it should have gotten at least 9s.
I can't remember if I played Final Fight 2, but I do remember like Final Fight never seemed to have the same speed as the Streets of Rage games.
It didn't. It always felt like it was what's what I'm looking for? Like it wasn't slower, maybe a little bit more stiff. Like it just had. I don't know. I just feel like maybe because of the animations, Street Rage are much more fluid, right? Like it just looks like there's a little bit more fluidity versus Final Fight. I don't know.
Plus you had like in Final Fight, I think you had some beefier characters like Mike Hagar and stuff.
Yeah, and the sprites were bigger in general, so I think that's also the case. But I forgot what they look like in Final Fight 2. So maybe it was more similar. I don't remember. I just remember it not being fun. And I played that with a friend because he had rented it. So this game also has 8 levels. There's 4 characters in here. Or excuse me, there's 4. Yeah, there's 4. There's Axel and Blaze. They're returned from the first game. There's Eddie Skate Hunter, who's Adam's brother. And my brother's other favorite character, Max Thunder, who's like this big old wrestler wearing like these wrestling tights, knee pads, he's shirtless, and he just looks like he could rip anyone into pieces.
He sounds like a character in like one episode of The Simpsons. Like,
he does.
He would just be a guest star for one time.
He also looks like a boss character. Like he looks like he would be one of the bosses in one of these levels. But he's totally playable. And he's one of the most fun characters to use because he has like an atomic drop. He has a lot more. He can throw enemies further and like he can jump and throw them, which the other characters can't because he's just that much bigger and that has that much more power.
Very much like their answer to Mike Hagar.
Yeah, and he's got a really cool dash move that's like dashing and spinning, so he has a little more mobility with that. He's a really fun character to use, and Skate, like we talked about, is also really great because he's the opposite of Max. Like he's like a teenager wearing rollerblades and like bright neon tank tops, right?
Yeah.
And he can jump on enemies' backs and punch their heads when you get behind them, right? He's really freaking cool to use. So I think all the characters in here have far more personality than a lot of other beat 'em ups at the time, just because of their animations and even just their attack movements, right? I think that's a big thing that makes it different from other games.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, Deucy, what did you think of Street Rage 2? Because I could gush about this for forever. Like this game, I could not sing more praises for. But I'm curious what you think, because I know you loved it back then. But how do you feel about it now in relation to other beat 'em ups that you've played, even up until now?
I feel like I said, if it doesn't have a license to it, like a Ninja Turtles or a Batman, this is what I think of when I think of beat 'em ups. Is everything in Streets of Rage, from the little all your enemies, even the regular street guys have a life bar to them. Mm-hmm. I think of beating up random trash cans and finding turkey.
Yeah. And that's right. Apples.
Yeah.
Like apples and chicken in here. It's really weird.
and then the lead pipe out of all the weapons. I mean, there was always a knife, but the lead pipe was like the weapon you wanted in any beat 'em up. You were hoping that a game had a lead pipe in it because of this.
It was always a pipe or like a bat, but I was more partial to the pipe because it just. And it's, again, because of this game, like when you swing with that pipe and you hit something, like it just sounds so huge and impactful.
It had crazy range too. It was like using Donatello in a game.
And also one little effect that they add is like the sound of the wind getting cut when it goes, whoo, like every time you swing it. So it's like you really feel like they're swinging the hell out of this thing with all their power possible, right?
Yeah.
And then it smacks someone and it just makes like the biggest pop. The levels in here I think are really gorgeous. I think the sprite work in here is just top notch for a Genesis game, and you could argue like it looks better than a lot of Super Nintendo games in some ways, just stylistically, because I think that's what defines this game beyond the combat mechanics is the graphics and art style, like the early 90s neon and techno club vibe, and also the music that is perfectly complementary to that too. Do you have any favorite levels on this one, dude? Like, did you beat this one at all?
No. I like every beat 'em up, I always seem to be going strong, and then there's just one section where I get my ass handed to me and I lose all my lives. And then I might survive that, and the very next one is going to be like a game over, continue situation.
Yeah.
I really wish a lot of these games, even in the collections, had sort of a simulated dropping a quarter into the machine so that you can just build up your lives or something.
This one, so I think Streets Rage 2 does have a cheat code. I forgot if it's for more lives or more continues, because I remember using that when I was a kid. Now I can beat it fine on normal because I've just played through it so many times and I know the levels so well. But there's some really cool set pieces in here. Like you're on the like on the bridge construction, like you're on this sort of like scaffolding and like this bridge that's being constructed. So it's like still missing pieces, but there's wires hanging everywhere, and like you're fighting all the bad guys, and you went to like this, I think it's like a semi truck or something like that. That has more bad guys inside it. And you fight a guy with a jetpack, for God's sake. I forgot what his name was. He's one of the more Jet. He's just one of the more annoying bosses to fight in this game.
I hated him. I forgot I was going to bring that up. What is it with beat 'em ups and flying enemies?
It's awful. It's awful.
The worst in Ninja Turtles. In this especially, like I just had to cheese it where I had to flying kick him once and then wait for him to do his moves, and then as soon as he dashed at me again, I had to flying kick him, and it was just the smallest chunk of life each time, and it took forever.
Yeah, he's really hard, and what I've learned to do is kind of like what you do, where it's like I've learned to kind of loop him in the jump kicks, like the neutral jump kick, because he'll fall back, he'll get up, do it that way. There's times where if you blitz move him at the right time, when he does like his Psycho Crusher horizontal
dash
charge thing, you can grand up out of that, like if you do the forward attack button or even do a super or a special on him. But he's definitely probably the most annoying boss to fight because he's flying.
Yep.
And you don't have very many options in the air in this game, even though it's perfectly sufficient for ground enemies. You can't fight anyone who's flying above you, and also like bobs up and down too. Like he's really tricky to get to.
And he moves on the 3D plane a lot. So when you think you've lined up, all of a sudden he's like sidestepped you, and you can't course correct in midair.
Yeah.
Like it's just you're committed to the one plane that you're on, and you're gonna miss.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would say he's definitely sort of a soft spot in this game, because a lot of the bosses you're gonna have some difficulties with them. Like I think the Ultimate Warrior looking boss in the Steam could be pretty tough too, because he could just bulldoze through your attacks just no problem at all. Like even in the middle of them. But I'd say they're a lot more fair than the first game, bar none. Like the first game is just freaking brutal, even on single player or with 2-player. But the second game, I can beat on normal. I can get through some levels on hard because hard just makes them hard. Enemies hard to kill, and also there's more of them, which is crazy on the Genesis, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So you're swarmed even more. I imagine it's much better experience for 2-player. But in general, this game, Deucy, like I said, it's like this is my beat 'em up comfort food for me in most instances before Streets Rage 4.
It's the same really for me though with every beat 'em up. Like you could even go on to the Capcom beat 'em up collection, and it'll be like I get through the levels perfectly fine, and then the bosses just take 2 or 3 lives out of me every time.
Yeah, that's definitely a signature of beat 'em ups, and I'm glad that they've moved away from that in modern times, so to speak. I don't know how to properly word that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad they left some of those design decisions in the past, because, again, back then I understand core munching, but then it sucks when it's like a home console. Like, I'm buying this.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks there's not at least a code or, like free credit mode or something. But nowadays, like, everything's just, you basically get like a score penalty or something else, right? Or you can play infinitely.
Yeah, back then I wouldn't mind an infinite continue. I don't care if I die at the boss and have to start at that level.
Yeah.
I don't want to start way back at level 1.
That's true. Like, I think that's the reasonable compromise, where it's like, if I could just have infinite continues and restart the level, I'm fine, because I'll eventually learn the level.
Yeah.
What sucks is getting to like level 6, getting game over, and like, oh geez, I have to go through 6 levels again. That was not easy.
Yeah. I do like that this collection, the Sega Master Collection, does have, it's not the quickest like save anywhere, but it is a little save function.
Yes.
That helps you more than games in the past ever had.
So I think, I didn't mention this either, but this is playable in a lot of collections now. Is it on Switch Online? I have anything to check on there. Is it on there or no?
I think Streets 2 is on, but I don't know if, or maybe 1 is. I don't think all 3 are.
I know all 3 aren't for sure.
Yeah.
And then there are the, I think they were called, like you said, the Sega Master Collection from the 360, which are purchasable on Series X.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, early December 2024, Sega delisted the Sega Genesis collection, which is the most recent collection
That's the one I've been playing them on.
Oh, Sega Genesis collection?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I've been playing on Switch as well, which had all 3 games and a ton of other great Genesis ones. And also with the TV set up right in the room.
And it looks like you're playing it on the TV.
Yeah, so the PS4 version has PSVR, has a PSVR
Oh,
mode,
yeah.
where you could kind of navigate the room and also put the cartridge in the system, which I thought was a great gimmick when I played it, right? It's really cool. I've been playing on Switch, but you'll need a physical version to play this, unfortunately, or I'd imagine it's probably on some other collection on Series X, and I don't know if what else is on PS Plus or Switch, but it's possible. You just go get the collection physical. It's like $16 to $20, and it's worth it. So that's the best way to play this. Otherwise, of course, you can get original hardware or some digital versions. But any final words to say on Streets Rage 2 Deuce before we move to the third game in the trilogy here?
No, just that, like I said, it was probably one of the best.
Yeah, this one, again, like probably top 5 game of all time for me. I will never stop loving Streets Rage 2. All right, now we get to the final game in our trilogy here. It's Streets Rage 3, released July 1994 by Sega. And this version is a little different. There's no Game Gear or Master System ports. Master System might have been long dead by this time. I don't know where Game Gear was in its lifespan. I imagine probably winding down because, again, Saturn was just about to come out. PS1 was on its way out. Game Boy was still strong. Game Gear was probably like on its last legs at this point. I want to say it's probably like early 95 is probably when it was starting to dwindle. So it's kind of weird that there was no port for this one on the Game Gear.
It was still alive enough to have a Batman Forever Game Gear game.
That's true. That was 95.
Yeah.
You're right about that. Yes, maybe it was a little bit closer. I wonder why they didn't port this one then. It's really weird. So this game is really different from Streets Rage 2 and 1 in a lot of ways. One of the weird things is that they made some significant changes from the Japanese version when it was localized. So the color palettes of Axel, Blaze, and Skate, he's known as Sammy Hunter in Japan.
I noticed this because on this Sega collection, you can play both versions, and I happened to do that. And I was like, whoa, this is a lot more different. Like, I know you'll get into a lot of the changes, but even just the color palettes are different.
Yes. So I remember renting this when I was a kid from the warehouse, like always, because I was really excited to play this because I loved of 2 so much. And that was immediately what struck me right away. It wasn't like a negative thing. It was just like, oh, they look really different. Like Axel has like this yellow and black pant gimmick.
It's like he's paying homage to Adam.
Yeah, yeah. He looked like Adam from their first game, Blaze. I think she has like this white outfit.
Yeah.
And I forgot what Skate looks like. I think he has like a black tank top and like red pants or something like that. They're really different. There's no real reason why they are changed because in the Japanese version, they're their Streets Rage 2 palettes, which is perfectly fine. Female characters wore less revealing outfits in the English version, which, it's fine. Like, I'm not upset about that, but I also get that things are a little bit more sensitive.
Oh, which ones?
In the Japanese version, they were wearing a little bit more risque clothing.
Oh, okay. Well,
but it might have been
not
fixed.
Blaze. I mean, she looked the same in both.
Yeah, I think it's more the age because they probably reveal more of like more cleavage or something like that. Or maybe they wear like short skirts. Like it's always one of those things when they localize these things. Like they put a few extra pixels to block things out. Some voice effects were also changed. For example, Axel's forward attack button or attack used to be called the grand upper, and he would say so. Now he says bare knuckle. But it's weird because in the Japanese version, he still says grand upper, and it's only the US version he says bare knuckle, which is the Japanese name of Streets of Rage.
Oh yeah, that doesn't make sense.
It's really weird.
At all.
One of the more notable changes, and this one's, again, totally fair, was a mid-boss named Ash was removed.
Oh, man.
He looks like, he was removed because he was a gay stereotype. He just looked like this guy who wore like these really tight clothing. He was very effeminate and, had these feminine gestures, and he was completely removed from the US version. He was also playable in the Japanese version. Like, apparently he was really fast and hit hard. But, Sega wanted no part of that when they localized it, and they just took him out completely.
I played this. I didn't realize he was really early in the game. He's already in the first level. And I showed my wife, and her quote was just, "Oh my."
Yeah. It's definitely like just 90s awful stereotype.
That
he looks like
ridiculous.
He looks like he looked like a caricature you'd see in like a Village People video, like something that someone would make fun of that in some way, right?
But then he had these motions of like what a woman looks like in a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
It's really weird. And that shows you how times change because that, in Japan, they were totally fine with that. But Sega was like, no, we cannot have this in the US version. So that's a change that I think is totally reasonable. I don't have any issue with that one. One I do have an issue with any game is when they make it purposely more difficult on the US version. So the normal US difficulty is even more difficult than the Japanese hard mode, which tells you a lot there. For no reason, there's no arcade version. I hate when any game does that, and back then they kind of did the combat rentals, but it sucks because the person being affected is the person playing the game.
Yeah.
I'm at home. I don't want to have to deal with this. Like it makes no sense to make it more difficult. And also, you can't complete the game on easy mode because it ends after stage 5. So there's also that on top of everything. So not only do you get a normal version that's harder than the Japanese version, but you also get penalized for not finishing the game if you play on easy.
Yeah.
It's a little bit silly.
What's easy? Just the Japanese hard?
Maybe. I don't know. I didn't even think to compare them, really. One bonus, though, is that special moves do consume less health in the US version, so I guess we get that small little concession.
And I think once you get down to a certain level on your life bar, it doesn't take any.
Yeah, I think that also happened in Streets Rage 2, because I remember abusing that when you could, because you're going out with the Blaze of Glory at that point. You may as well use it while you can. There's also a few plot differences between two versions. There's an explosive called Raxine in the Japanese version. This explosive is meant to just obliterate millions or thousands of people in the city. That was changed in the US version. It's a little bit more, it's a little bit more subdued from the cutscenes. Like, they still talk about an explosion, but it's not so focused on like in the Japanese version. And also the plot mostly revolves around these robot clones that Mr. X has made, and you basically are just out to stop Mr. X and stop him from detonating an explosion in the city. There's not, I'd say, like, it's a little bit more of a mature story, but I don't know, it's weird that they would make those kind of concessions as well. Also, one of the levels is the White House, or at least it appears to be in the White House in the Japanese version. And in the US version, that's just totally changed. It's just changed to, like, I forgot what it is. I think it's just like an office building or something like that.
I've noticed little things. I played the first level on both. Mm-hmm. There's just little graphical differences. Like at the end, you're in this warehouse with a lot of boxes and everything. And at the end, there's like a hole blown open into a wall in the Japanese version. And that's where the enemies are coming in from. Mm-hmm. And then in US, it's just completely open, as if like a giant shutter door was opened or something. And I'm like, why do you need that little thing changed?
Yeah, it's always puzzling because when you see differences like that seem like they're meaningless, you do have to question, like, well, what was a bad thing about that originally? Like, that still requires a developer or an artist to make a new sprite to go over that. Like, what was the significance of that? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that this version seemed to have been completely different from the Japanese version. That wasn't the case with the first two games at all. I guess we're going to review scores here before we get into the music and really impressions of the game, I should say. So review scores here, we have GamePro issue 61, August 1994. These are once again out of 5. They gave graphics a 4, sound a 4, control a 4, fun factor a 4. They said there are a lot of moves to discover, including ones that weren't in the manual. They praised the 6-button controller supports. They thought the graphics and sound were in line with previous Streets Rage games, but noted slowdown in some areas, and thought the Japanese version's names looked more diverse, which I thought was really weird. Or no, excuse me, the enemies looked more diverse as far as like what their sprites and color palettes were. I didn't really get that impression.
There was like 2 different colors for each enemy that I saw.
There was, yeah. So they added a little bit more diversity with that, but I guess GamePro liked the Japanese version's color palette. I don't know.
You know what I did notice in probably all 3 of these is a lot of the enemies looked like characters from other beat-em-ups.
They did.
As sort of a dig at them. Like, there was the guy that's in all blue with the red hair. He looks
he's
like
using like Garcia is like the most common name for him.
But he looks like Billy from Double Dragon. Mm-hmm. There's a guy that's shirtless, but he's bald. He looks like a Bobo.
Yeah.
There's one guy, I think it's in the very beginning of the 3rd game, who looks very much like Ken from Street Fighter.
That's what I thought in some instances, because there's definitely some familiarities you'll see with some of the enemies and sprites. Like, even like the bar guy looks like he's out of Art of Fighting or something like that.
The big guy that shoots fire and he has like a red hat and suspenders. He looks like Mario.
Guy. He does, except he spits fire.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's some inspirations in this game from other games.
Yeah,
I think that's a fair conclusion. EGM reviewed this, issue 60, July 1994. These are out of 10, so they gave an 8.777, which is ironically the same score they gave Final Fight a couple years, or back in 1991, right? It's kind of fun.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah. One reviewer liked the music, but thought it wasn't up to par to Koshiro's other projects. The animation and gameplay were all great, but the same reviewer questioned why Sega changed the characters' outfits to be more gender neutral, as they put it. Another reviewer thought the music was really bad, but praised big levels and enemies. And the other 2 thought that it was a really solid sequel, but the formula is getting tired at this point, which I think that's pretty fair to say. Like, I would say
that is always a critic's like famous words.
It is
for reviews back in the day. Like, Mega Man got the same thing, and then you get something that's different, and they hate it.
Exactly.
And then you're like, well, where's the classic? It's like, well, why did you complain about the classic?
It's the weird balance that they're trying to strike, because I understand, like, and beat 'em ups by nature in general are repetitive, right? And it's like there's only so many ways you can iterate or innovate upon the previous game. And, you know, Streets of Rage, like 2 for me is definitely the peak out of the original trilogy, and 3 is still really, really good. But I think the way they're looking at it is like they're probably looking at more disfavorably compared to other games at the time. I don't know what else was really out in '94. But, you know, like, yeah, Donkey Kong Country, of course, right? But I don't know about in the beat-em-up space. But, yeah, there's like Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct. There's a lot of different games that are trying new things that are a little bit different. Super Metroid. And beat-em-ups are still popular, but, you know, games are kind of transitioning more towards, like, platformers and fighting games in some instances.
Yeah, I don't even think Super Nintendo had too many on there. Like, Sega was becoming the fighting and beat-em-up type system.
Yeah, and again, to reinforce the point, like, they're slowly transitioning out of Genesis. Like, 32X was about to come out, I think, or had been out. I forgot if it was 94, 95. Saturn was out already in Japan. I think it was already out here. So Streets of Rage 3, it's like, it's a late Genesis game. Like, Genesis stopped making, I think in 97 was like Frogger was the last game ever made. But really, like, 94, 95 is really when it was winding down, right? Because they're focusing on 32-bit systems. So I think, like, the reviews here are, you know, they're pretty fair. Like, I love Streets of Rage 3, but I can't say it's as good as 2. But I would say, like, maybe it's loved more now than it was back then.
I feel it's weird because I like what they did with the improvements of movement. Like, there's a dash now. Overall, just hitting feels faster. But I think I would prefer 2 over it, because the music, they were right. I wouldn't say it sucked like they did.
No way, yeah.
But it did sort of get on my nerves a little. It wasn't as good as even the first one.
Well, you know what it is? And I kind of thought that too initially, because I do remember the music when I was a kid just being like, oh, like, this is freaking weird, because it's definitely more experimental techno. Like, he went really hard on the techno side of things.
Yeah.
And I think with Streets of Rage 2, there's a lot more melody in his music. Whereas here, there's instances where it does sound random and, like, randomized in some ways, right?
It's just noise at some points.
It's just like, and it just reminds me of, like, if you're in a club and there's, like, just a heavy techno beat going on. That's what it sounds like sometimes, like you're just in a deafening club. But when you get through later in the game, like, then it becomes more melodic, and, like, the music becomes a little bit more familiar, like, you know, I guess more like Streets of Rage 2. But it also sounds really fantastic. I almost feel like there's a parallel to Mega Man 2 and 3 in some instances, where a lot of people might consider Mega Man 2 the peak. I consider 3 because I grew up with it. But 3 still has more dimensions to its music. It just may not be as good as 2 in some respects, right? And I think that's the case with Streets of Rage 2 and 3, where 2 just has amazing music all throughout. And 3, I think there's some tracks you can really like, and there's some where, like, yeah, this sounds like just techno noise.
Yeah.
And it's also on the Genesis, so it just sounds kind of gritty and distorted.
As far as, I even had, like, thoughts on the sound effects, like, because it was just noticeable to me, where 1 sounded very soft when you hit things and hit people, which you don't want from a beat 'em up. 2 I think you mentioned it sounded like it was cranked up to 11. Like,
yeah.
It was almost comically over the top, but it was really good sounding. It sounded like Batman Returns on Super Nintendo. 3 found it was like Goldilocks. It found the perfect balance right at the end. And I think I like it the best, where it's like, it's hard hitting, but it's not like a really loud smack.
It doesn't stand out over the music.
Yeah.
Like, it fits with it. Like, the mix of the sounds is better with the music than it is in other games, which I agree with. Like, 2 just sounds really, really loud when you hit anything.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in a bad way. It's noticeable.
It's just funny. It's like, haha, got you.
So let's get into some characters and some gameplay stuff here, Deucy. So there are 7 levels in here. They're all really, really hard. Like, you could definitely tell this is difficult. Like, after I'd read that and I played, I was like, yeah, this feels like this would be a Japanese hard mode, because your moves do so little damage, even to basic enemies. It's really crazy. Like, it's just, you know, there's more enemies on the screen at once. The bosses are just as difficult. You know, I think this is a little bit better balanced than Streets of Rage 1, just because of the movement options and the combat, because it's just more advanced.
Like I said, it was quicker, and I feel like you have more moves that will hit multiple enemies to clear it out a little easier than the first couple.
Exactly, yeah. So, and there's also, let's see, there's a new character. There's a couple new characters, really, because this one you can unlock a few more characters in this one. So we'll go through them. There's Axel and Blaze. They return from the previous games, and Skate also returns here. A new character is Dr. Gilbert Zan, who, God, I was really excited to play as him when I was a kid, and I do not like playing as Gilbert Zan at all. He's like 6'7". He's he replaces Max, and he's like this really tall, skinny guy with like he almost has like a mustache, reminds me of like a walrus, like a Wilford Brimley.
I think he's kind of, isn't he part cyborg?
Yes, because he has that cybernetic arm.
Yeah,
yeah. And he skates around, so his dash is more of like a hover skate.
I don't know, it just feels unwieldy when I'm playing as him, and like, I think he's supposed to be a heavy hitter, but he's almost too heavy.
Well, he's too heavy for his movements.
Yeah.
And, every character has sort of like a basic combo. It's like 3 or 4 hits. And that also has different ranges, right? But with Zan, like, it sucks because he really has like 2 or 3 punches, but they're all short range and stiff, and they don't do any more damage than any of the other characters, it feels like. So this game's already difficult as it is. Really, when I play as Zan, it just feels like it's more of a handicap than anything else. Yeah. He's not fun to use. I remember as a kid vividly, like, damn, like, I'm really disappointed he sucks because he looks cool. Like, he looks like a pretty badass character. And he's got, like, this shock arm thing as one of his moves. And he has like this almost like Blanca, like electric shock thing to clear enemies around him. But that's the best of his combat. Everything else sucks about him.
And like you said, it's a shame that they took out Max Thunder for this.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what made me salty back then. Is like, I love playing as Max, and we got Zan, who sucks. You can unlock a couple characters in here. You can unlock Shiva, who's Mr. X's bodyguard right-hand man. I think it's just you beat the first level, and you have to hold a button or something like that. Then he can become playable in the next level. And then also, that's more fun, Rue, who is a kangaroo. He's named Victi in Japan. There's 2 ways you can unlock Rue. The one that I figured out accidentally when I was a kid was there's a point in, I think it's the first or second level. I think it's the first level.
You're fighting Rue and another guy.
And the clown guy with the whip.
Yeah.
So Rue is basically not kidnapped, but he's sort of like this. He looks like a circus guy. It's like his pet, or like his sort of, he owns Rue kind of thing.
Yeah.
So in the game, you have the option to kill Rue and the guy, because Rue will attack you. He even has like this hurricane kick attack that looks like it's straight out of Street Fighter.
Yeah.
But if you just kill the clown guy, Rue will escape and he'll become playable after that.
That's what I thought, because I was playing this and I don't know if I had read that somewhere, but I was like, you fight Rue for a good amount of time before the clown guy even shows up. But once he did, I thought, wait a minute, I don't think I have to beat Rue, even though he's punching the crap out of me.
Yep, you don't have to.
I just focus on this other guy, and when I did, all of a sudden the level ended and he ran away, and I thought, I bet I did something good there.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool, because I remember doing that as a kid. And there's an alternate way where I think you have to hold like up and B as a certain level ends or something like that. So there's ways you can unlock them, but I thought that was really cool that you can beat the crap out of the bad guy, and then you get a new character because the new character escapes. There's sort of like a narrative thread that connects it for a reason. He's pretty fun to use. Like he's got like it's cool because like his sprite still has like the chain on him because he's sort of like enslaved from the circus guy, so he has like a little bit of history there.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool. But my brother and I played as him a lot in co-op because he was just like, he had like a more hopping distance. He didn't hit very hard or far, but he was the kangaroo with a hurricane kick. That's all that really mattered, you know?
And I even told you, like, I didn't really play this back in the day, but for some reason that stuck out to me. I was like, wasn't there a kangaroo in one of these?
Yeah, and you can also play as him in, actually, I forgot if he's in Streets Rage 4. I think he is.
I think he is, yeah.
But it's also great because in one of the levels, he makes a cameo first in the bar, like he's behind the bar, like he's a bartender almost.
Awesome, yes.
So I thought that was kind of fun. I was like, oh, they made a little throwback to Rue. That's pretty nice. Yeah. All right, Deucy. Well, we've covered all 3 games. I don't know. What do you think about the Streets Rage trilogy? I guess we're at the end of our fun episode here.
I want to play them more. I wish, like I said, that there was some way to make it a little easier just to get through. Like when you think about like the beat 'em up collections, they usually come from arcades, and then they give you that option of like inserting coins and giving yourself tons of lives. And I really want to do that just to experience the story and experience the later levels. I think that's a little more difficult with a lot of the places that you can find Streets of Rage now. But it is still just a fun time to play the same like first 3 levels over and over again.
You're like, I may not finish the game, but god dang, I love those first few levels so much.
Luckily the music is great in those.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This trilogy of games is among my favorite franchises in gaming, and also including with Streets Rage 4, right? Like that's kind of tangential to this, even though it's related. But
I finally noticed a lot of what Streets of Rage 4 is referencing because I played these 3.
Absolutely, and as also Streets Rage 4, which again we'll cover that in a future episode, but it has basically every character from the entire franchise and their version of it. So there's Streets Rage 1, 2, and 3 versions of these characters in their sprite forms, and they look amazing. So that's just another reason why, to me, that's like the number one beat 'em up for me, the new number one beat 'em up of all time, because it's such a callback to the history of the franchise and the series, and it's just the culmination of great beat 'em ups. But as far as like this original trilogy, I don't know how you'd rank them, Deuce, but for me it'd be Streets of Rage 2 as number one, and then I have Streets of Rage 3, and then Streets of Rage 1. I think that's totally reasonable to have that in that order.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, because Streets of Rage 1, I like it for its significance in Sega's history. It's a little bit hard to play now because it does feel stiff. It does feel slow. The bosses are a nightmare.
Yeah.
2 is just, like I said, beat 'em up bliss cranked up to 11. And 3 is just a freaking great beat 'em up. But play the Japanese version because it's a lot easier and it's a lot more fair. And, you might get some interesting story bits out of it because it's just a little bit different on there.
Yeah, the only problem when I was playing this version was I didn't understand the Japanese writing.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's always the downfall. Yeah, they didn't translate it at all. Yeah. All right. Well, if anyone else out there wants to tell us about their favorite beat 'em ups or just anything about Streets of Rage, because we always love talking about Streets of Rage. At least I do, Deucey. I don't know about you. You can reach us at legiongamingpod@gmail.com, and then again at Legion Gaming Podcast on Instagram. Any final words for our beat 'em up friends, Deucey?
Just go out there and risk anything on the Streets of Rage.